Have you ever wondered what it would be like if you couldn't see, hear, smell, taste, or touch? In 1983, a group of scientists thought that a human without any senses would be able to perceive God, so they found an elderly man who volunteered to have all of his senses surgically destroyed for this experiment. He would be completely alone with his thoughts. After a few days, he claimed that he heard his dead wife speaking to him. Then he began naming the dead relatives of the scientists and only information that their dead relatives would know. After a week, he started throwing himself against a wall to try and feel some kind of pain, but he couldn't. He tried to claw at his non-functioning eyes, but he felt nothing. He began to yell, "No heaven, no forgiveness," for 5 hours straight. In the end, he had to be physically restrained for weeks. When he turned his blind eyes and made direct eye contact for the first time with a scientist and said, "I have spoken to God, and he has abandoned us," before his heart stopped for no apparent reason.
I'm 24 years old and I recently married my childhood sweetheart. We had a pretty small wedding due to the global situation, but it was planned well in advance, so we didn't cancel, just kept it to family. And we planned to have a party with everyone else at a later date. For some background on my husband, his parents had him pretty young. They were both 18 and 19, and he has a very close family. Our wedding reception was quite intimate, but we had the traditional speeches planned: father of the bride, best man, which was my husband's brother, and the groom. It was only the day before that my mother-in-law asked if she could have the mic to say a few words when we sat down to eat, and we said this would be great. Big mistake. Stupid us. We figured she would talk about us at our wedding, so we never asked what she planned to say. She announced to all of our guests that she's expecting a baby. She's still pretty young and very healthy, but it was a huge shock that just completely took over the night. What's even worse for me is that I'm also pregnant and we planned to announce it at the wedding, but I told my husband to just leave it out of his speech. Everything felt a bit sour for me after that. After the wedding, I didn't speak to my mother-in-law for a few days, and I got a call from her sister to ask what's up. I explained that I felt like the attention was taken away from us without our permission.
Have you ever met someone who wouldn't take no for an answer? That's what happened to Jillian, but things took a strange and unexpected turn. Jillian always went to this one cafe, and one day she bumped into a young man. His name was Charles. Charles came from a wealthy family and thought that no woman could ever say no to him. He asked Jillian to have coffee with him, and she did. They had a friendly conversation for a while, but by the time the cafe was about to close, Charles gently grabbed Jillian by the hand and asked her out. She said, "I'm sorry, you're just not my type," and left. This made Charles furious. From then on, he'd come to the same cafe every single day to hope that Jillian was there. It got to the point where Jillian would look through the window and see Charles waiting for her. She'd feel uncomfortable and leave. It just seemed like he wouldn't take no for an answer. But things were not so simple. One day, it was the final straw. Charles brought flowers to the cafe and waited for Jillian. When she didn't show up, Charles took the flowers, threw them on the ground, and stomped on them. He yelled, "That's it, I'm gonna make you my girlfriend if it's the last thing I do." The next day, he looked up Jillian's address in the phone book and went to her house. But he could never have expected what he would find there. Follow for part 2.
Am I the asshole for refusing to attend an apology dinner after my mother-in-law called me a bad mother at my son's funeral? I lost my son to congenital heart disease, and he did not survive the open heart surgery at the age of 1 year and 6 months. Mother-in-law and I were in constant conflict. Things always been bad between us, but in those months, we reached our limit. She kept getting involved in my son's treatment and criticized every decision I made, claiming I didn't know how to handle my son's illness. We went low contact, but she kept causing issues occasionally. My husband was torn between our son's illness and his mother's issues. When my son passed away, she came to the funeral and caused a scene by arguing with me, knowing I had no energy for it.
Oh my gosh.
She used the fact that everyone was there so she could say it was my fault my son was born sick and I didn't take care of him properly, and that I was the one who took their grandchild away from them and caused them heartache. She then loudly called me a bad mother. I had no idea how I kept my composure.
I have a movie idea! I know it's been a little bit, but I'm back. So hear me out. A young woman has spent basically her entire life in the mental hospital. But while she's in the hospital, she gets pregnant and has a baby boy. Soon after his birth, she begins to act normal and stable, so she gets released to raise him. But by the boy's 18th birthday, his mother is very ill. So he went to go visit her, maybe for the last time. But before he left, her last words to him were, "I'm not as crazy as everyone says I am. Trace my steps and come and find me." What? The next day, she died. He wasn't there for the death, and she wanted a closed casket funeral. But her words kept playing in his mind. Come and find me. So he kind of sort of did something really illegal. He dug up her grave. Inside, he found nothing but her mental hospital bracelet from years ago. So he does what she says. He checks himself into the mental hospital and begins to trace her steps. Is his mother alive? Is this some sort of sick game she's playing? Are there more clues within the hospital walls? Or did the pain of her death cause him to lose it?
Never play this game with your friends. Once there was a group of girls who heard about the game Baby Blue. They didn't believe in it but thought they could scare their friend Laura. So they sent Laura into a bathroom by herself. She turned off the lights, closed the door, and put her arms out as if to hold a baby. Then started chanting Baby Blue 13 times. What happened next cannot be explained. Laura felt a heavy weight in her arms. Then she felt the weight in her arms scratching her. She was terrified and didn't know what to do. She wanted to drop it, but she was afraid of what might happen if she did, so she froze, and the weight grew heavier and heavier. Suddenly, she saw a woman in the bathroom mirror with a twisted look on her face. She screamed in terror. When her friends heard her scream, they tried to open the door, but it was locked. When they finally opened the door, they found Laura on the floor. Her eyes had been scratched out. They tried to move her body, but they couldn't, because something large and invisible was pinning her to the ground.
Am I the asshole for not returning my bridesmaid's gift after the wedding was canceled? My friend Jessica, 28 female, was supposed to get married over the summer. She asked me and a few of our other friends to be her bridesmaids by giving us gift boxes. They were really nice. Well, Jessica's fiance got a call from her boyfriend, and the wedding was called off. Neither one of them knew about each other. We were all just as blindsided as he was. Jessica recently contacted me to tell me that since the trip isn't happening, she wants the bridesmaid's gift back. When I told Jessica that I had assumed this stuff was a gift, so I'd already used some of it, she got really mad and said that I should have saved it for the trip and that I had to reimburse her for the price of all of the stuff.
What a tacky bitch.
Her and the maid of honor, her sister, are talking a lot of shit in the group chat that I'm stealing from Jessica. Am I the asshole? First of all,
3 months after I was born, my family moved into a different house in a new neighborhood. My mom told me that after we moved, even though I was just a baby, I started acting differently. She said that in the middle of the night, she'd hear me laughing, and she'd look at the baby camera monitor, and I'd be standing in my crib reaching out, as if there was someone in the room I was reaching for, but there was no one there. Once I got older and started talking, my mom told me that I would always talk about the man in the hat, and sometimes I would get upset and start crying and ask my mom where he was because I wanted to play with him. But my mom thought I just had an imaginary friend. But as I grew up, the man in the hat never went away. I kept talking about him. Eventually, my mom got worried and took me to a child psychologist when I was 5 years old. And I don't really remember it, but during the sessions, the psychologist would ask me questions about the man in the hat. But apparently, whenever she referred to him as my imaginary friend, I would get really angry and defiant and say he's not imaginary. And when she asked me what he was like, I was able to describe him in vivid detail. He wore a blue baseball hat and dark glasses at all times, a long-sleeve turtleneck, and pants. After 5 sessions, the psychologist concluded that I probably just had a really intense imagination, which is common for little kids. But the psychologist warned my mom that she should keep a close eye on it.
So this is probably my favorite story about my cheating ex. As many stories as I have on him, this one happened after we were broken up. He had left me for a girl that he was seeing on the side, and we hadn't spoken in months. We had both blocked each other on pretty much everything. But as most girls do, I do have my fake Instagram account, and he seemed pretty happy in his new relationship. I believed that until I got a DM from a girl. She sent me screenshots of messages and fake accounts that he had made to communicate to her. So he had literally been cheating on the girl that he was with now with her the whole time. I literally don't understand people sometimes. Both him and I were in the same friend group, mostly because we pretty much grew up together. So I talked to another member of the group about what we should do. Now, I believe in karma and that people get what they deserve, but who's to say that I'm not karma? So we decided to show up to his house with not only the girl he was cheating with, but all the girls he cheated on me with. And take care of this, I kid you not, game show style. Follow, share, interact, and I'll do a part.
This is why you should never look through someone else's things. Once there was a girl named Ryoko who had a really weird roommate in college, but when she tried to look through her things, she found something that terrified her. Ryoko's roommate was named Yuki, and Yuki was someone who always kept to herself. She didn't speak much and she rarely left the room. But after living with her for a while, Ryoko realized that Yuki would always sneak out in the middle of the night and not come back for a really long time. This made Ryoko really curious and maybe just a little bit suspicious. So one day Ryoko decided to follow her. She pretended to be asleep and waited until Yuki left. Then Ryoko waited a few more minutes and followed Yuki, always staying in the shadows to not be noticed. After about 30 minutes, they ended up at the cemetery. Ryoko watched as Yuki leaned over a grave, embracing it and laughing hysterically. This scared Ryoko so much that she ran away terrified. She came home, went to bed, and waited for Yuki to come back. But the next morning, things became even more strange. Ryoko woke up and heard that last night something unbelievable happened to her roommate. Something that no one can explain. Follow for part 2. This is why you should never look through someone else's things. After Ryoko followed her roommate Yuki one night to a cemetery, she found Yuki laughing hysterically over a grave. She got scared and ran home, but Yuki never came back. The next morning, Ryoko found out something terrifying. Yuki's body was found by the cemetery the next morning. She had unalived herself right after Ryoko ran away. It turns out the grave that she was sneaking out every night to go see belonged to her ex-boyfriend, and she never told anyone. Ryoko was shocked. She felt sorry for Yuki, but also thought that it was really strange. Why was Yuki laughing? A few days passed and Yuki's belongings are still in their room. It seemed like she didn't have any family or friends coming to get it either. Then she found something she never should have. Ryoko flipped through Yuki's things until she found her diary, and when she flipped to the last page, she froze. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. On the last page, written in red ink, it said, "I know you saw me."
Let this be a reminder that there really are monsters out there. In 2007, a woman living right near a prison in California got home late one night and went right to bed. Around midnight, she woke up to footsteps on her first floor, assumed it was her roommate, so she goes downstairs to say hi. She yells out to her roommate, who doesn't say anything, and then in walks this giant man who she doesn't recognize. She runs upstairs, jumps in her closet into the crawl space and hides. As she's helplessly tucked away in this little crawl space, trying not to make any sound, all she hears is this giant man sprinting around her house, running into walls, flipping furniture and screaming in frustration because he can't find her. Finally, after several hours, she slowly opens the crawl space back up, crawls out and gets her phone off the nightstand and calls police. As she's telling the police her story, she describes the person who had broken in, and they stop her and say, "Ma'am, go back in the crawl space and stay there. We'll be there as soon as we can." It turned out a 6'11" convicted murderer had escaped the prison and was still on the loose.
Usually when my clients arrive for their appointment, they're not wearing any makeup. But this girl wore makeup to the appointment just to have me take it off and then do her makeup again. I thought that was a little strange, but after I removed her makeup, I saw her nose. The tip of her nose was bright red and even a little bit deformed. It looked like a really, really bad sunburn. I tried to avoid the area when I started doing her makeup, but eventually I had to put makeup on her nose. And when I did, it was just not working. Her skin was literally peeling off. The makeup would not stay. So that's when I asked her, "Is there something going on with your nose that I should know about?" Let me also just say that at this point, it was starting to swell and was noticeably more red than it was when she got there. That's when she told me that she had recently been out of the country for a mission trip and that she had picked up a flesh-eating bacteria, which had affected her nose. Then she told me not to worry because she had been on antibiotics for months, and that the irritation on her nose was just her skin healing. For once, I was horrified, not my client.
4 years ago, I broke up with my boyfriend, Dan, but I decided not to tell him. Dan had been coming around to my apartment and my work, even though I repeatedly told him I was not interested. I had been planning to move to get away from him, and I didn't want him to have an excuse to be in my life. So when I moved away, I didn't tell him I was pregnant, and I didn't put his name on the birth certificate. Last year, when my daughter was 2, I got married and my husband adopted her. Dan and my sister were still friends in high school, and since Dan still lives in my hometown, they occasionally catch up. A week ago, Dan called me and said that he found out through my sister that I'd been pregnant not long after we broke up. He was furious that I had never told him and that the baby might be his, and accused me of keeping him away from his daughter. I told my husband, and he's furious that I never told him about my daughter's father. He was always under the impression that her father hadn't wanted to be in the picture, and he's been cold to me ever since I told him. I do not ever want Dan around my daughter, and I think I was justified in my decision to protect her from him. But Dan keeps calling and asking to see his daughter, and my husband says I betrayed both him and...
Clouds are fading, and our vision's getting clearer.
So this is probably my favorite story about my cheating ex. As many stories as I have on him, this one happened after we were broken up. He had left me for a girl that he was seeing on the side, and we hadn't spoken in months. We had both blocked each other on pretty much everything. But as most girls do, I do have my fake Instagram account, and he seemed pretty happy in his new relationship. I believed that until I got a DM from a girl. She sent me screenshots of messages and fake accounts that he had made to communicate to her. So he had literally been cheating on the girl that he was with now with her the whole time. I literally don't understand people sometimes. Both him and I were in the same friend group, mostly because we pretty much grew up together. So I talked to another member of the group about what we should do. Now, I believe in karma and that people get what they deserve, but who's to say that I'm not karma? So we decided to show up to his house with not only the girl he was cheating with, but all the girls he cheated on me with. And take care of this, I kid you not, game show style. Follow, share, interact, and I'll do a part